So let's talk about censorship. I'm going to give you a little story about my own censorship on YouTube and on Facebook because I want to demonstrate how badly it's gone over the last 10 years for me in relation to censorship. First, I moved to YouTube to expand my topics, but because I was focusing mostly on veganism, even though I had an anti-war, anti-imperialist position, but I never really actually did videos on it, and so I wanted to expand that on YouTube. But before that, I was actually on Facebook, and this is one of the reasons I started YouTube, my YouTube channel, Faint Signals from Vega, because on Facebook I had an account, and it was called Live Vegan, and I had by the end stage before the algorithms hit, I had about 58,000 subscribers, 58,000 followers on Live Vegan on Facebook. 2012, suddenly the algorithms hit, and then it went from getting about 100 to 250 people a day and having great engagement and having people sending me photos of, when I did different little campaigns and stuff. There was a whole bunch of interaction and engagement, and I was thinking, wow, this is great, this page is really reaching people, and that's a great thing when you're talking about veganism, because at the time in 2009 in particular, it was really, really very, very moving. Sorry about the wind. Hopefully you can hear me. I'll move closer. Sorry, I live in Tasmania. It's an island, and so things can get kind of windy here. And I'm not sure if this covered microphone is kind of working for that. But anyway, so it was really, there was lots of engagement on Live Vegan, and I was thinking, well, that's great, because it was glacially slow. The veganism was taking off very, very slowly, and I thought, wow, I don't even know if this is ever going to take hold. And I became vegan in 2005, and I was doing vegan education along the way, and then then I started this page. So and it got a lot of followers very quickly, and there was lots of engagement, and then it came to literally a screeching halt in 2012, which was really depressing. I have to say, it was really depressing. Because it was kind of feeling like a real community, and there were people from all over the place, different countries, and literally since then it's actually lost about 8,000 people, and when you post something, barely anybody, like we're talking 5, maybe 10 people see it. So that's so it's been going backwards, and even when if you do a premiere of a video, barely anybody sees it. So Facebook basically killed that page, and it's completely, pretty much dead. I hardly bother with it, and when I do, I notice it's barely barely anybody there, and that's really sad for me. And I started this YouTube channel, and it's taken 3 years to get 1,000 subscribers. It's 1,050 at the moment, and then it starts to it goes back and forward. When I do a vegan video, usually I'll lose a couple of people, or two or three. And that's too bad, because I really see it that it's so relevant to, it's so connected to anti-imperialism, anti-war, and I've been speaking about this for years now. All these discriminations are faces of the same ignorance, and they all cause violence, and where you have one, you'll have all forms. But I started this channel, and it was going to be veganism and anti-imperialism and anti-war, and I've added some extra topics now. So basically, I do videos that I find I want to talk about that particular topic because I feel it's important. And so there's lots of other different topics, but the main ones are anti-imperialism, anti-war, and veganism, and gender topics sometimes. And the algorithms rip through these videos. They rip through the titles, they rip through the videos itself to check for words that they don't want. And if you mention Palestine, if you mention you're talking about the Iraq War, or any sort of imperialist wars, the word imperialism, the word war, if you swear, if you mention Israel, there's these different alarm bells go off with these algorithms. I mean, they'll scan your videos for any sort of music, or if you're using a snippet of somebody's work, they know how to go through these videos and check for things that flick, their little sensor alarms, and then you'll have suppression. If you ever mention Palestine, if you do a video about the oppression of Palestinians, like this video now, they'll rip through that. If I mention the word Palestine, that'll probably be suppressed too. I realize that, but it's not going to stop me talking about Palestine, because that's it's beyond worse than apartheid ever was in South Africa, and those people desperately need the voice of the world, so that this dreadful oppression ends for them. In the end, as much as it's kind of a bit it's depressing to say the least, that when you talk about these issues that really need to get fair hearing, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen the way it is today. The censorship now today is so outrageous, through algorithms, through through Google and all the different platforms. Those social media platforms are totally connected to the national security state, and they do not like anything that's anti-imperialist, anti-war, anything that might threaten their power, threaten capitalism. It's just something that it's very clear that you only have to hear about other stories from other leftist channels, how much they're being suppressed when they get demonetized if they mention a certain thing. And of course, all these things like Facebook should be seen as like the public square. There's nothing that's an alternative that has as much reach as Facebook, and yet it's basically it's privately owned. So basically, a public square is privately owned, really. I mean, that's the only place we can actually talk, where it gets where there's people on that platform that we might be able to reach, but they've decided what is fake news and what is acceptable discourse. They're so connected to the national security state, the US national security state, they're not going to allow much in the way of speaking about anti-war, anti-imperialism. They're not too bad with veganism now, because they've seen that that's a way of making money. So they're okay. They're kind of okay with that. About 10 or 11 years ago, they weren't that okay with it. They saw that as a threat, but now there's a real niche for people who are interested in it. So they don't suppress that as badly. Although my live vegan page is completely dead. So go figure. But that's how it is. So. And I could show you snapshots, I could show you screenshots of how many people used to like things in the early days of that page. It was really quite incredible. So even on my personal page, I'm sitting as close as I can to the microphone. Even on my personal page on Facebook, barely anybody sees anything I post, including the posts I make including the people who create the content of the posts that I'm posting, who are friends of mine on Facebook, don't see what I'm posting. That's how nuts the censorship is on Facebook. That literally the people that are creating the content that I'm posting, who are friends of mine, do not see the posts that I'm posting. I mean, you couldn't make this up. That's how bad it is, and I don't see in my feed those people, even though I have them as get notifications and close friends or whatever. They're anti-imperialist, anti-war activists. I do not see their stuff in my feed, rarely. And the pages that I subscribe to that are theirs, I don't see their pages either. I have to physically go to their pages to see what they're talking about. So if I don't even, and I'm on their friends list and vice versa, if I don't see that, how on earth is anybody who doesn't even know about these things going to see those subjects, those topics? And don't get me started about Twitter. I found out recently that any replies I make from my personal account on Twitter, I have 2 or 3 accounts that are different ones. Faint Signals from Vega is different to my personal account, TYR. They've actually they've deboosted my replies, so that if I reply to anybody on Twitter, it's way down the bottom there, so people have to go through dozens and dozens to see if I've made a reply. And the same happens on YouTube. When I actually reply, and I'm very polite on these spaces, I consider everything that I do in public, in private too, but when I'm doing things in public like that, I assume that everybody can see it, and I try and behave in a way that I would in real life. I don't sort of allow, I try and do my best to behave in a civil manner. And so when I reply on YouTube, I might even be the first person to post a response to something, and I'll have a look, and there'll be all these people underneath, all these comments underneath, and people, hundreds of likes or whatever, and I'll have nothing, not a like. And it can be even just a sort of a completely benign thing like, thanks very much, great, video or whatever. Nothing. And so I sort of feel like there's a certain sort of shadow banning going on, not only on Twitter for me, but also on YouTube, because I do talk about Palestinian rights, and I do talk about anti-imperialism and anti-war, and I do sometimes go on to different sites and sort of challenge some of the nonsense, but I do it in a polite way. And we're supposed to have, this is the irony of it all. For all the, oh, you can just post whatever you like, you've got freedom of speech, really? Not with all this censorship going on. I mean, it's like being in a box and not being able to, you can say whatever you like in a box, but nobody's going to hear it, right? So, people can say, well, you can say whatever you like, but you just happen to be in a box and nobody can hear you, really. So I don't know where this is going, but like I see the move to, fascism in the United States. Just recently, I just saw some guy, some right-winger on TV, literally talking about people taking up weapons and killing protesters. I mean, and that might sound like, oh, he's just some wackadoo, but there's actually a movement towards that with the Trump and the federal law enforcement taking people off the streets and all of that. He literally is a neo-fascist, and it's most likely that if he gets in again, even though it looks like he's not going to get in with the terrible, the terrible way he's dealt with the COVID virus, he might very well still get in. I don't rule him out at all, and I think it's a mistake for people to think that because he's completely wrecked the economy with his pathetic COVID pandemic response, that means he's not going to get in. That's not necessarily the case. And if he gets in, it could turn into a full-on fascist thing. So even mentioning the word fascist in this video will probably also get this video suppressed. Not that I have hardly anybody subscribers on my channel, and I'm not saying that my videos are anything, I mean, there are people that can speak about issues a lot better than I can. I'm not a journalist, and I do speculate and all that kind of stuff, but I know that there are things that you can see things happening when you mention certain things, the way the numbers that you get and whatever. So I've lost my train of thought there, but when I was talking about Twitter, though, you know how you get the trending topics? Well, they actually design those topics for the individual, supposedly. So you end up in a little echo chamber where you never really get introduced to much else bar the things that you've mentioned or that you have shown an interest in, which means that you never really get to expand your knowledge in a way. Mind you, I find Twitter is just it's just a kind of, in some ways, a cesspool of sort of literal a lot of it's nonsense and also just propaganda. But people who don't know what the hell's going on with US imperialism, they don't hear anything about it in the corporate mainstream media. They don't know what the hell's going on, and they're completely propagandized, and they're not going to get anything else but that propaganda, because that's another way that you censor conversation. You make sure that people never get introduced to any other topic bar the little echo chamber that they're in. And if they keep getting the propaganda, which all the corporate media like to put out about the US, the American exceptionalism, and they basically never talk about war, and they're funded by the weapons industry, they have ads by the weapons industry, you're not going to hear anything. If they're funded by the weapons industry and they're also in cahoots with the national security state, you're not going to hear anything about the US imperialism throughout the world. You're not going to hear about any real news about how they're overthrowing governments in Bolivia and in Venezuela and all that sort of thing. You're just going to hear literal fake news. That's the real fake news. So if you're not, and you don't know about any of this because you think that's actual news, like CNN, MSNBC and all of that, if you think that's real news, then you're always just going to be living in this little box and never ever get any access to any outside real news, real independent news, which means that's a form of censorship. And there are so many people so propagandized, particularly in my country here in Australia, because 75% of the media is owned by that awful Rupert Murdoch. So you're only going to get anti-Chinese propaganda now, and it's full on from Sky News, and eventually they manufacture consent for the war on China, which is coming. So this is the problem that we have, where such extreme censorship, it's so extreme now. Sometimes I think, just get it over with. Just go full on fascist and just, because this is sort of like, it's a dystopian nightmare we're living, really. The way it's so sewn up now, the information, and it's so propagandized. Like, if you've heard the statement by one of the CIA directors in 1980, William Casey, he said, when we know that we've basically, the public is actually receiving everything that they receive is false information, that's when we know, we've done our job, basically. I'll post the quote. It's not exactly that, it's but basically he's saying, until we've actually propagandized the public to the point where they're completely propagandized, that's when we know we've done our job. Now, he said that back in 1981. This is the CIA director, William Casey, and that is where it's at pretty much now. Mission accomplished, really. To say that I find it so depressing that all the different leftist channels, there are channels far, far greater than me and do a much better job than I do, to think that, like people like Abby Martin and the Empire Files, even though they've got quite a few subscribers on their YouTube channel, you literally have to search exactly for that channel and for the content to actually find it on YouTube. That's how difficult it is to find content by people like that, and by the Empire Files and programs like that. And Wikipedia is one of the most searched. It comes up in Google searches. I don't use Google, but Google searches, when you search for things, Wikipedia comes up, and Wikipedia has gone that way too, of suppressing real independent journalism, demoting just independent journalists like the Grey Zone, putting it in the same class as the Epoch Times, which is a Falun Gong, completely wackadoo, anti-Chinese publication. Wikipedia is totally on board with suppressing and censoring, and that's one of the top things that comes up when you Google things. It must be really soul-destroying in some ways for people like for the Empire Files to know that they spend all this time doing these wonderful programs, and you have to search high and low to come across it, and their channel is suppressed. And even their page, I never even see anything. I'm subscribed to the Empire Files on Facebook. I never see any updates from that. I never see any updates from Abby Martin's page. It's like it doesn't exist. And that's the real cancel culture, as I've talked about in a few videos ago. That's the real cancel culture. And the other cancel culture is how they cancel academics like Stephen Salita, who's a Palestinian academic who can't seem to get a job anywhere. They've sabotaged him.
The First Amendment is the foundation of our democracy and is most crucial at our universities, where open debates on issues of public concern tend to be at the forefront of our nation's most significant moral discussions. We must recognize that Professor Salita's termination has occurred in a broader national context in which powerful interests seek to silence and punish students and faculty who express criticism of Israeli human rights violations. The most common tactic, which has also been deployed here, is to falsely equate legitimate challenges to Israeli government action with anti-Semitism, or to label passionate rhetoric uncivil. On campuses across the country, over the last year and a half alone, there have been approximately 200 of documented incidents in which students, faculty, and activists have been intimidated, maligned, investigated, and even prosecuted for speaking out in support of Palestinian human rights. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And now Professor Salita has been terminated from his tenured position at U of I for tweets about recent events in Gaza. Professor Salita's great crime is that he experienced horror and dismay at the loss of so many innocent lives in Palestine, and he reacted viscerally, not in a classroom or on campus, but through his personal Twitter account. But condemning atrocities committed by Israel is not uncivil, even if the speech is offensive to some. In fact, the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights has found as much in dismissing Title VI complaints against universities in California based on such spurious accusations.
They've sabotaged other academics, and Norman Finkelstein, he's another one who talks about Palestine and Palestinian rights. That's a whole other thing, what academia has done to these various academics who talk about inconvenient facts, inconvenient truths that we all need to know, that affect the lives of tens of thousands of Palestinians who are suffering so greatly. Sadly, all those people that were on that letter, including that ridiculous Barry Weiss, I don't know who the hell some of them are, but they're certainly not being suppressed. And And it's sad to see Noam Chomsky, who, I don't know, has he been speaking out about the suppression of Stephen Salita and people like that? These people on that letter, they don't talk about these people that are being suppressed and can't find a job anywhere because they're talking about inconvenient issues like Palestine and other issues like that. Those are the people that are being really cancelled. Even Abby Martin was cancelled from a speaking appointment in Georgia, Southern Georgia University, I think it was. They basically cancelled her because they looked back at her work and realized she was speaking out about the oppression of Palestinians, and they decided just to cancel her as a speaker, even though she had something lined up. There's all sorts of things going on that are really deceptive and covert, and they can change the algorithms any day they want to pick out something. They do that. Twitter is, it's definitely a thing that Twitter actually edits trending topics. If there's something that's inconvenient on the day, they will edit it out. And as much as I dislike Trump and as much as he's a horror story, he has every right to feel victimized by the corporate mainstream media, because they've Russiagated him when there was barely anything in it. If you look at Erin Matte's reporting, or the Grey Zone's reporting about that, that Russiagate thing was pretty much, a lot of it, a fabrication. And so he has every right to feel that they're disgusting, because they have been disgusting in that regard. And I really, really dislike Trump, and I think he's very dangerous. But there are so many things that he does that are problematic, and so many things like the genocide in Yemen that he's been supporting, and his nepotism, and he's using his station to make more money. And there's a whole bunch of things, his killing of Soleimani, all of those different things. There's so many things they could get him on, and what do? They invent something to cover up for the Democratic Party's mistakes and for Hillary Clinton. So anyway, that's all I really wanted to talk about. I've ventured away from myself when I'm talking about the censorship, because it's such a much wider issue, and it's so disastrous. It is really, really, if you don't have freedom, real freedom of speech, I'm talking real freedom of speech, and you don't have dissent, and you don't have a functioning fourth estate, which we don't anywhere in the world really, you can only lead to fascism eventually, and you can only lead to corporations ruling politicians. That's where it is, and we're marching towards fascism now. Literally now, we are. And it's been working up to this for a long time, and now it's all sewn up. The mainstream media is all sewn up. These social media platforms are in cahoots with the national security state. There's suppression left and right, and the right complains about being suppressed. Nothing like the left. Nothing like it. I'll probably limp along. My channel will probably limp along because of the particular content that I do, and I've just accepted that that's how it's going to be. Not that I'm any fabulous kind of podcaster by any stretch, and I'm not a journalist, but I try and do my bit because it's so important that we talk about these issues, because of what I've just talked about too, and because there's millions of lives at stake. But I expect that my channel is going to limp along into the future, and being barely seen, and if occasionally something is let out, like one video that I did about 6 months ago, suddenly it must have slipped through somehow and got 600-700 views or something, which shows that that's possible. But it's really up to the algorithms and the whims of the people who put in algorithms for the day, what they feel like they want people to see, what they don't want people to see. It's really up to the whims of these privately owned platforms. The Silicon Valley is really basically deciding what people get to know about and what they don't get to know about, and also what people they want to basically destroy if they're actually using YouTube as their career or their livelihood. With a flick of an algorithm that's a permanent thing, they can destroy that channel, basically destroy that person's livelihood. So that's where we are now. Isn't that fabulous? So anyway, that's all I want to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, please share, please click the notifications bell, click the like button. All these things help elevate the channel, elevate Faint Signals from Vega. Also clicking on the end videos helps elevate the channel, because without that, without actually people who have subscribed to the channel and who just by accident might actually get a notification from me, because that's the other thing, YouTube, you don't even get notifications even though you click the all notifications bell. You don't even get those from some people. I don't know about it. I know that other people don't get it either. So even when you click notifications bell, you don't get all the content. So there you go, another way that YouTube, I don't know what, it's sort of really kind of nuts. Anyway, so if you actually appreciate the content, don't do it if you don't like the content, but if you appreciate the content, please consider doing all of that, sharing and all of that, because it all helps, because basically my channel is just going to limp along because of the type of things, the type of topics I do. And the only way it's ever going to get any sort of airing, if you think it needs to be aired, if you like that content, the only way to do that is to sort of like support it by doing all those things. It's really sad that we have to do all those things. It's just a pity that, I'll just say one more thing. I had another channel called Live Vegan, and I started it many years ago, and it had about 5,000 subscribers on it, which it still does, and it's completely dead too. I cannot revive it. I've tried to get the attention of subscribers that were on there to come over to this channel. Do you think I can do it? Like, it's just impossible. It's like it's completely dead. So I don't know what goes on. It's a weird thing. But anyway, that's how it is. So thanks so much for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Paint Signals from Vegan. Till next time. Bye for now.